Hey, my feel good friend, and welcome to the Feel Good Social podcast. I'm your host, Kinsey, and I hope that you are just having a wonderful week so far, a wonderful summer. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I know you got lots going on right now, and I am chuckling because I don't know if you have been listening to the Feel Good Social podcast for the past few months or not, but this year, Brett and I actually did sell our home, and the selling of our home nicely coincided with Brett's parents going on a 6-week vacation abroad, which is super amazing for them. And so we volunteered very gratefully to be their dog sitters, right? And cat. So we have 5 dogs and a cat, and all of them seem to be laying around me and snoring right now, but this is the best time and place that I can find to record this podcast episode for you. So we will see. Hopefully, once again, things just go smoothly and we don't have a lot of interruptions or anything like that. But hey, if it happens, I do apologize, my friend. And that is life. And I know you understand. And today's episode topic is so awesome. I know that you won't mind, right? Today, we are talking all about creating your content repurposing plan for your business. And this is definitely an episode where I would go grab a pen and paper or get out your notes app to take notes on, because we are going to be breaking down how you can outline your weekly and monthly content plan so that you can repurpose your content in all the areas on all the platforms, wherever you want to be showing up in the most strategic way. And also it makes your life so much easier, which I am all for, finding that sweet spot between strategy and making your life as easy peasy as possible, right? Before we do dive in, I want to say, if you enjoy the Feel Good Social podcast, my friend, I would absolutely love it if you could share the show with any of your business buddies who could also use to listen to it, who also could use the advice that we dish up every week. Tell them about the show. Tell them you love it. Share your favorite episode with them. And if you're feeling up to it, share your favorite episode to your Instagram stories and make sure that you tag me. I'm at Feel Good Social. If you tag me when you share it to your Instagram stories, I will be able to see it. I will be able to reshare it and spread the love right back to you. I will also give you a follow because I love you. And then I will start creeping on your posts and commenting and just loving on you over there on Instagram. Okay. So thank you so much for tuning in. I'm so excited about today's topic. Let's do it. Hey, friend, and welcome to the Feel Good Social podcast. I'm your host, Kinsey, and I'm here to help you market your business in a genuine way that works without wasting your precious time. On this show, we chat about social media strategy and mindset tips with a focus on, you guessed it, feeling good. So sit back, relax, and enjoy some genuine conversation for the good of your biz. Real quick, have I invited you to join the Feel Good Social Club yet? Oh man, my friend, I would love for you to check out our new monthly membership for down-to-earth entrepreneurs who are ready to create content with ease, actually show up and strategically market your business online every month, and also make friends with rad down-to-earth entrepreneurs who are just like you, who get it, who are in the posting trenches with you, and who are ever ready to give you a friendly air high five or kick in the accountability booty whenever you need it. The Feel Good Social Club is where it is at. Check it out, feelgoodsocial.com/club. In the club, we have a content library full of Canva templates and tutorials and resources to help you make content creation as easy as possible. We also have monthly content planning workshops where we all come together and talk about the upcoming month's strategy for our content. And we also have community forums where you can get together, ask questions of other club members, brainstorm ideas, ask for feedback. So definitely check it out, feelgoodsocial.com/club. Our Feel Good members are seriously some of the most amazing people that I have ever met. And I would love for you to join us, feelgoodsocial.com/club. Check it out. Join today. We would love to see you in there, my friend. All right, let's dive back into today's episode. All right, my friend, do you have your pen and paper and or notes app out? because I know I sound like a dork telling you to take notes, but seriously, I have listeners reaching out to me almost every week being like, look at the notes I took on this week's episode, or I took so many notes and stuff like that. It just makes me so happy. And it's true. I really try to dish up actionable information and break things down to you in a way that you can seriously like take action on today, right? So go get the pen and paper. Let's talk about content repurposing and how you can outline your content repurposing strategy for your brand. Okay. So the first thing I really want to quick touch on is what the heck I'm talking about when I'm saying content repurposing. Okay. So basically, we are talking about your brand's full big picture content strategy, right? How can you create content in the online world for your brand that is going to speak to your ideal customers, increase your visibility, gain you leads, right? Nurture relationships with people who you can help, who will want to buy from you, and then eventually lead them to take action and buy from your business, right? This is what content marketing is all about. And it includes Instagram and social media for sure. Like every post you create for your brand is content that you are creating for your brand, right? But it also includes things like your blog, things like your email newsletter, things like if you have a podcast, such as for Feel Good Social Podcast, the podcast is part of our content strategy and it plays a big role into content repurposing that I do for Feel Good Social. So I'm going to be sharing my journey as well, my plan for repurposing for Feel Good Social and all that stuff, just as examples in this episode. Do not worry. It can also include if you do YouTube videos or anything like that every week, right? So any content or posting that you put out online, whether it be your website, whether it be a social media platform, that is what we're talking about, right? And content repurposing is basically when you are using similar concepts and topics and ideas and creating content across multiple platforms that all are under that same topic umbrella and work together, right? So here is a myth that I want to bust real quick. And if you've listened to the show before, you've probably heard me bust this myth already, but you may need to hear it again. So I'm going to say it again, right? A lot of us, honestly, when we start our businesses and start showing up online, we think we need to always be creating from scratch and creating new and coming up with new ideas. We think if we're posting to multiple platforms in different ways, then we need to create different content across all these different platforms, right? A lot of people will start their businesses thinking, oh my gosh, I can't post the same thing on Facebook as I can on Instagram, right? Oh my gosh, this is my topic for my Instagram post today, so I can't create a blog post about it. Like, no, actually, that is the opposite of what makes sense strategically and for your own sanity and time and energy, right? Actually, if you do repurpose your content and the topics that you're talking about across multiple platforms, you hit them with the same concepts and topics when in the email list as you do in the Instagram posts of the week, as you do in the podcast episodes of the week, right? Like if you can talk about the same thing again and again, and it's going out in all of your different platforms, then actually you are being more strategic with your content because our attention spans are so minimal these days. I swear there is a statistic that says that we need to hear, read, see something 20 times before it sinks in, before we can actually pause and like allow that information to sink into our brains. We remember it and we take action on it, right? 20 times. So no, you are not being redundant. You are actually being helpful if you do create content around similar topics for your brand again and again and again, and push out the same topics and the same content into all the different places where you show up online, even if the same customer sees it in your email list and in your social media posts and hears it on your podcast and all that different stuff. You are actually helping them to remember the information and allowing them to take action on it if they need to take action on it, right? So it's actually really strategic to post about the same stuff all over the place and repurpose content. And that is what repurposing content means, right? Is when we're basically pushing out the same information across multiple platforms and figuring out what that looks like in a plan of attack for our business. Okay, so that is what we are going to be talking about today. And like I said, it's really, really important for you to do this. It's actually more strategic for you to do this because it will allow your customers to have the information sink in and then take action on it, right? So doing this is not only more strategic, but what I love about content repurposing is that it makes it so much easier on you as the content creator for your business, right? If you can create a content repurposing plan and make sure that all of your different pieces of content and the platforms that you're showing up on across the interwebs are building upon each other and working together, like it's just makes so much more sense in our brains, and it'll take you so much less time than if you were trying to create from scratch on Twitter and LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook and the podcast and the blog and the email, all those being different topics and having to create different posts and all this different stuff. No, that is way too much. Like that's way too much work and you don't got to do it. Okay. So that's what we're talking about today. Let's go ahead and dive into the how of content repurposing and creating your content plan of attack. This can look different for every business. Like this is going to depend on how you want to show up online, what you want to talk about, and what your business is really, right? But I'm going to give you all the details that you need right now to really structure and outline your content repurposing plan of attack, right? And I'm also going to be sharing how I do it for Feel Good Social so you can see it in action. So the first thing I think that we need to do is choose our platforms, right? When you think about your big picture content strategy, when you're creating content for your brand every week, how and where do you want to be showing up online every week? Okay, I like to break it down weekly myself. So like I said in the intro, this doesn't just have to be social media platforms. Content that you create online could be your email list, your podcast, if you have one, your blog, a weekly YouTube video. Those are kind of the weekly content pieces that often you will see people creating online, like not daily. I could not. Some people create daily podcasts. I could not do that, my friend. So think about, do I want to send emails to my email list every week? Do I want to start a podcast or put out weekly podcast shows? Do I want to do a weekly blog post for my business? Does that make sense? Do I want to share a weekly YouTube video? All of these are really, really great options for kind of those longer lasting core pieces of content for lots of different brands, right? What I want to recommend that you do if you are currently choosing how you want to show up every week, I think an email list is awesome, right? For every brand. Building an email list is really, really great because you own your email list as opposed to social media followings where Instagram owns your followers and they could just pull your account out in the future whenever they want, right? And then you could lose all those followers, right? So starting an email list is awesome. I think that a weekly email is a great idea as well. Yes, lots of people send lots of emails, and sometimes people get overwhelmed by all the emails that they're receiving and all that different stuff. But high touch email lists are the way that you create an email list that converts, right? So I think it's an awesome idea to start a newsletter and send out weekly emails to your email list, okay? Podcasts are great, blogs are great, YouTube videos are great. The way I would decide what platform to show up on as like a weekly core piece of content is one, consider what do you love? Like what will you enjoy the most showing up for and creating content for, right? If you love to speak and you kind of like the idea of podcasting, then maybe podcasting is for you. If you are more of a typer, a wordsmith, a writer, then maybe blogging is for you, right? And if you don't mind showing up on a video, then maybe YouTube is for you, right? I personally go with podcasting for Feel Good Social because not only do I love the format of podcasts. I love listening to podcasts myself. I think that they're more intimate, right? I love how people can just put you in your earbuds for like an hour and listen to you as you like do the dishes or whatever, go on a run. And it allows like that kind of intimate form of like communication to me, whereas YouTube videos tend to be like a little bit shorter, a little bit snappier, a little bit like tips focused and like loud and all that different stuff, right? Plus, I really don't like being on video. Like I've gotten way more comfortable with it, but yeah, no, not for me, right? That's why I chose podcasting. And I also actually do blogging somewhat, but I relate it to the podcast every week. So this is something we'll talk about again in just a little bit. So for me, my weekly forms of kind of core pieces of content are email, podcast, and then blog via the show notes for the podcast. Okay. So that's my form of weekly core content, the bigger, longer lasting content that I create for Feel Good Social. What does it look like for you? Right. So think, what do I want to show up for every week? What makes sense for me? And then also think, what do my ideal customers want from me, right? This is the other side of the equation that's also very, very important to consider, okay? Because some businesses and brands have an audience that really, really enjoy YouTube videos, right? Or YouTube videos make sense for their business and for their ideal audience, right? For example, designers, graphic designers, like I absolutely love listening to graphic design podcasts and stuff like that because it's fun for me. But most graphic design podcasts talk about the business side of their business, of their graphic design business, right? They don't get into the nitty gritty of, ooh, this font looks cool or this color palette looks great in podcast format because people can't see it, right? So just think about those types of things for your brand. What makes sense for you and what makes sense for your ideal customers? Okay, so those are kind of the bigger content platforms that you could choose from to show up on every week, right? Email, podcast, blog, YouTube video. Those are just a few. There's probably others that I'm not thinking of right now, right? But then there's also the social media platforms to consider, right? So Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn. There's so many to choose from, right? And I should have said this way earlier. You don't got to do it all. Okay. This is actually a big flashing light disclaimer that I should have started out with in the beginning of this episode is that this is a content repurposing plan of attack that we are creating for you, and you have the agency to choose what you want to do and what you want to show up for every week. This can also evolve over time, right? And you do not have to overwhelm yourself showing up in all the platforms, all the places, all the time, right? So start small, start with baby steps, make it as easy on yourself as possible, my friend, and then slowly start adding more platforms and adding more places as you feel comfortable and as it becomes a little bit easier, right? So I just had to say that real quick and drive it home is you do not have to do it all. This can evolve over time as well. Start with baby steps, slowly start adding more platforms as you want to and as it gets easier. And also, if you create a plan of attack and you start it and you're like, oh my God, this feels overwhelming, you're not committed to it. Okay. You're allowed to change it later or skip a week of something. There have been weeks when I have not put out podcast episodes. Okay. So just had to say that as well. So choose your kind of core pieces of content platforms. And then what you want to do is think about your social media platforms and where you want to show up for those, right? And social media platforms, I like to think of as a little bit differently because you're not necessarily posting once a week to social media as you would with your email list or blog or podcast or whatever it is. Social media is more so those platforms where you want to try to show up a little bit more consistently than that. I would say 3 times a week minimum, unless you just want to take a break. Totally cool with that. Not going to shame you, but definitely probably 3 times a week to 7 times a week is a good idea for most social media platforms, right? And there's lots of different ones to choose from. So Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Facebook, right? All these different platforms to choose from. And like I said, you do not need to show up in all the places, right? So once again, bring it back to where do I want to show up? What platform do I enjoy the most? And then also, where is my ideal customer hanging out the most, right? those are the two sides of the coin to consider, because if you choose a platform that you hate showing up on, it's going to make your life a nightmare to create content for it and have to show up on there all the time. So, if you hate TikTok, then don't show up on TikTok, whatever, it's fine. You can connect with your ideal customers somewhere else, right? But, if your ideal customers are showing up and hanging out on Instagram most often, then that probably is a platform that you want to show up on in some way, right? Because that is where you have the most chance to connect with your ideal customers and really reach them, right? Also think about what makes sense for your brand, right? If you do have kind of a bloggy, how-to-y, or like wedding or design or travel or some sort of brand that makes sense for Pinterest, then maybe Pinterest is something that you really want to invest a lot of time in, because that's content that makes sense that people are searching for over there, right? So think about all those things and then choose, where do I want to show up, right? And there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to choosing how you want to show up. It is what makes sense for you, your brand, your ideal customers, and how much time you have to commit to creating content in the overall big picture of things, right? So like I said, start with baby steps. Start small, choose one or two places to start showing up, and then you can slowly start adding more pieces into your content repurposing strategy. Do you know what your brand vibe is on Instagram? I have a new fun quiz that's just for you, my friend. I, of all people, know how hard it is to figure out how the heck you're supposed to translate your brand to the gram. And with this quick 7-question quiz, we will help you hone in on your brand's personality, voice, and visuals so that you can show up consistently and create content that looks beautiful and feels on brand for you. This quiz is so awesome. It's been a long time coming, and I know that you're going to have a lot of fun with it. Plus, the results will help you show up in the best way for you. If you'd like to check out our new brand vibe quiz, just head to feelgoodsocial.com/quiz. Pretty easy. Head to feelgoodsocial.com/quiz to find out what your brand's vibe is on social media and start showing up there for your brand. Also, I want to tell you that we do go through seasons in our business, right? So it's okay to say, hey, in the fall, I'm really going to show up in lots of different places. I'm going to do my email list once a week, blog, podcast, even a YouTube video, and show up on 3 different social media platforms. But then maybe in the summertime, I'm saying this because this is me currently. I'm lightening my load through the summertime of 2022 because, I've been working so hard for the past few years. I'm just really feeling like enjoying myself and lightening my load a little bit when it comes to my content strategy, right? So if you do go through a season where you want to take it a little easier in your business, or maybe you have a lot going on personally and you just don't have time to do all the things content-wise, that's okay, right? Not only can this plan evolve over time, but you can also choose the seasons where you want to show up more and the seasons where you want to show up less. And that's totally okay, right? So I had to give that permission as well. But for example, when it comes to choosing your platforms for Feel Good Social, these are the platforms that we consistently show up on every week: email, podcast, blog, which is show notes for the podcast, right? And then for social media, I primarily focus on Instagram. Like I have sometimes incorporated some other social media platforms. I started kind of posting on TikTok, and would it be easy for me to post on TikTok because I create so many reels? Yeah, but do I? Not really. So I just had to say that too, in case, don't let anyone ever shame you for not repurposing in a way that makes sense, because me as a social media marketer myself, there are so many more things I could do, but whatever. I don't really care that much. And then also sometimes I do show up on Pinterest, and actually Pinterest is a platform that I do want to start investing more time and energy into when I get back from my quote unquote summer break, a stress-free social media summer break or whatever that I'm giving myself, right? Because I actually have seen a lot of great results from Pinterest for Feel Good Social. Pinterest is one of those leading platforms that actually gives me leads for my email list, which is wonderful, right? So for Feel Good Social, like I said, email, podcast, blog, Instagram, sometimes Pinterest, once in a blue moon TikTok. So that is our platforms that we show up on, but that isn't what it has to look like for you. Okay. Whew, that was a long step one, wasn't it? Step number 2, choose your core piece of content or weekly theme. Okay. So this is something that can look very, very different depending on the season you're in your business and or what type of business you have or how you show up every week, right? It's a very fluid step, but it really allows you to understand your content repurposing strategy and understand how you can repurpose your content across all platforms and all the different stuff, right? So in general, unless you are going through like a launch or a promotion in your business, or unless you know exactly what you want to talk about, or you have a sort of business where you're just like duplicating similar posts throughout the seasons that you go through, right? I like to suggest that people choose a weekly theme or topic for their content. And this can sometimes be based on the core piece of content that you produce, right? So for Feel Good Social, it's the podcast. Whatever like the topic of the week for the podcast is, that is usually what I go off of to reproduce my emails to my email list every week, to create Instagram posts out of, right? Usually whatever we're talking about in the podcast, that's kind of what I consider my quote unquote weekly content theme, the topic of my podcast, because that is really what dictates what we talk about, right? Like the podcast is my core piece of content every week. It's what I prioritize the most. It's what I care about the most. And so that is what really runs the show over here at Feel Good Social. So what does that look like for you, right? Maybe you write a blog post every week and it's like, okay, what is the topic of this blog post? And then how can I use this topic to create an email for my email list, to create multiple social media posts out of, yada, yada, yada. If you happen to not have a blog or a podcast or a YouTube video or whatever it is, that is also okay. Firstly, you do not have to use this weekly theme strategy if you don't want to. Like, whatever, just keep showing up for your brand in a valuable way for your ideal customers and you're golden. I just like to use it to help me generate content ideas for myself when it comes to all the different content that I'm creating and repurposing all across the board, right? So if you don't have a blog or a podcast or a YouTube video that can kind of dictate the weekly theme, you can just choose one for yourself. If it makes sense to you, if it helps your brain work in the repurposing of content strategy that you're creating for yourself, choose a weekly theme for yourself. This is what I want to talk about this week, right? That is allowed. And I love this weekly theme because it really allows you to understand the umbrella under which all of the content that you are creating and repurposing for your brand each week, it just gives it that like guideline, that umbrella guideline for you to go off of, right? So for the podcast, whatever our topic is, that's where I start. And then I move on to step 3, which is choosing your content pillars and types of posts that you want to create. So for each of the different platforms that you're showing up on, think about like either the types of posts or the pillars of posts that you want to create, the pillars of content, I guess, right? So for your email list, for example, you can totally just send out one email a week. You could even send out one email every other week or every month, right? If you wanted to. I do recommend one a week just so you can show up more regularly for your customers and nurture them over there, right? But, if you wanted to send out one email a week, how do you want to format that email? And you could even send out multiple emails a week, right? So for Feel Good Social, and I have not been doing this very well lately, guys, just so you know. It doesn't always look perfect and it doesn't always work out perfectly, but it's good to have a plan that you want to aim for so that you can try to make it happen if possible. I have not been doing this very well for Feel Good Social lately. We will see after stress-free social media summer. If I come back in hot and running, I will start sending out more emails, right? But generally for Feel Good Social, I try to send out 2 emails a week, right? I like to send out one on Tuesdays that are promoting the podcast episode because that's the day that they're released. I'm kind of just talking literally about the podcast episode. I very easily copy paste my show notes into email format and tweak it so that it sounds a little bit more personal and a little bit more like I'm sending an email instead of just copy pasting show notes, right? But I usually take my show notes from my podcast and reformat it into an email where it will make people hopefully want to listen, right? And that is one email that I send out every week. Then I also like to share like a personal story email on Sundays to my email list that has something to do with the topic, right? So for content repurposing, what I would do if this was the topic of my podcast this week, for example, I would send out an email on Tuesday saying, ooh, this is why you need to create a content repurposing plan of attack for yourself. Tune in to find out my step-by-step process, right? That would be email number 1 for Feel Good Social. Email number 2 on Sundays, more story focused, would probably be a personal story about me realizing that I'm in over my head trying to create content for all the different places that I want to show up online for all my different clients and all that different stuff. And finally, I realized how much more strategic it was to show up with a repurposing strategy, talking about the same topics over and over in all the different areas on all the different platforms. Not only is that more strategic, but then it made my life so much easier. And I was able to save so much more time once I started doing this. And now I have time to enjoy myself and focus on the bigger picture strategy of my business, right? That might be email number 2, more story focused, right? But also think about the different platforms that you want to show up on, right? So even for the podcast, I could break it into 2 different types of posts, right? Sometimes I do mini-sodes of the Feel Good Social podcast, and usually those are more actionable episodes based on the regular episode's topic. So this doesn't have to be what your repurposing plan looks like, but I'm just sharing examples of content pillars and types of posts that you can create and how you can repurpose content based on that umbrella theme that you choose for your brand every week, right? So that's how maybe you could create 2 different posts out of a podcast or something like that. But really where this comes in handy is social media. So for social media, I talk about content pillars all the time, right? I have several episodes detailing how to choose content pillars for your brand and yada, 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 all that jazz. But in general, a few like content pillars that most brands could have are tips and tricks, inspirational quotes, customer testimonials, product features and promotions, right? Story focused posts on social media is another content pillar that I love to share. And then there's different types of posts you can share, right? Reels, Instagram stories, TikToks, are like all the different types for all the different platforms. So thinking about what pillars you want to share about on social media and also what types of content you want to create, looking at your different platforms for your repurposing strategy and figuring out how can these all work together, and then how can I create content each week based on my umbrella theme, right? So one of my repurposing strategies that I absolutely love, and once again, this is very ambitious. I do not do this every week for Feel Good Social, right? Okay, so if you think about Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, for example, Instagram Reels and Instagram Stories are performing really, really well lately. I actually think that Instagram Reels and Instagram Stories are probably going to give you the most return on your investment of time and brain power and energy if you put your effort into creating more of those if you have a limited capacity, right? And what is so amazing is if you also want to show up on TikTok and Pinterest, then those are all the same format, right? Well, Pinterest actually has idea pins, which is what I'm talking about, which are in the same vertical format as Instagram stories, Instagram reels, TikTok videos, and then Pinterest idea pins fall into that category as well. And all of them kind of have very similar strategies behind them in sharing that type of content, right? So that is definitely like the format of content, the type of post I would choose to create for your brand if you are looking to show up on all of those different platforms, right? Because you can create one video / reel or whatever it is, right? And share it to Instagram, share that reel to your Instagram stories. You could share that same video to TikTok, and you could share that exact same video to Pinterest idea pins. right? So that could be a really great investment for you and a type of content to choose to create every week based on your umbrella theme of the week. Now, thinking about different pillars, like kind of topic pillars more so, what I really like to do is break it down and give myself guidelines as I want to share one customer testimonial a week, one hot tip post a week, one offer feature a week, one story post a week, right? And then I like to think about the umbrella theme and create a post out of that umbrella theme that has to do with topics. So maybe if content repurposing was my theme of the week for Feel Good Social, I would create a customer testimonial where one of my Feel Good Social clubbers was talking about how helpful the club templates are with content repurposing, right? I actually do have screenshots of clubbers being like, oh my gosh, I can totally share this as a reel and an Instagram idea and a Pinterest idea pin and, a TikTok video, whatever that looks like, right? I have Feel Good Social clubber screenshots that say something to that effect. And so I'm laughing because this could totally be a testimonial that I could totally share, right? Having to do with having to do with content repurposing. So then I would think about 3 hot tips for content repurposing. Turn that into a reel. I would think about a personal story that I have to do with content repurposing. Hey, there's that one that I thought about that I could share with my email list earlier. I'm going to use that exact same one, right? There are all these different ways where your content starts to cross over and come together, and you can totally use it on all these different platforms in all these different ways. If I was legit planning out this for Feel Good Social, I would start with my core piece of content, how to create your content repurposing strategy for your brand. That is this episode this week, right? I may think of a mini-sode. This probably isn't going to happen, my friend, because I am embracing my stress-free social media summer, right? So this mini-sode may happen in the future. Probably not going to happen this week, if we're honest. But what is a mini-sode that could go side by side, coincide with how to create your content repurposing strategy? Maybe it is 3 templates to create for your brand that help you with a content repurposing process or something like that, right? The emails, I already said, personal story email about content repurposing, regular email, just sharing and promoting the episode. I will turn that into an Instagram reel to promote the episode every week, right? I could also share a customer testimonial reel about content repurposing. I can share just a promotional post promoting how the Feel Good Social Club helps you repurpose content so easily because you can cross post to different platforms especially with our Reels formatted templates, right? I could share, again, the personal story on Instagram, maybe a reel of my face or showing me going on a hike with the dogs because I have so much more time now that I content repurpose, right? I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing ideas out there. But most of my social media posts I do create in Reels format because if I have time, I can also share those same reels to Pinterest and TikTok and my Instagram stories and all that jazz, right? So this is kind of how content repurposing comes together, is by starting by choosing your platforms, then choosing your core pieces of weekly content themes, then choosing your content pillars and types of posts. And all of a sudden, you can see how the web is weaving and all your pieces of content are working together. And you can use the different ideas that you come up with to share to all the different platforms. It all just comes together. And if you do want to chat more about this at all, definitely reach out to me on Instagram. I'm at Feel Good Social. But the final step in this outlining of your content repurposing strategy is really creating your batch planning workflow then, right? Once you understand what platforms you want to be posting on every week, what types of content you want to create, your weekly themes, and how everything is working together, I really want you to give yourself guidelines for actually creating the content. And I really would love for you to try to batch create the content, right? Because it is so much easier when you can sit down and you have all of these ideas in your head and you can see the big picture and how everything's working together and you just get it done in that one sitting versus trying to put out the email and then, 2 days later, oh wait, I need to do this Instagram post, and oh wait, over here I'm scrambling to do this. And no, if you try to do the steps individually, you have to get yourself back into your workflow and remember all those things that you'd forgotten in the past 2 days about, oh, I wanted to use this story for this email and this Instagram post over here, right? So I really encourage you to give yourself guidelines and set expectations for yourself. How am I going to make my workflow for content repurposing as easy as possible? And I do recommend that you start with weekly batch planning of this stuff, right? Choose one day a week to think about the upcoming week, the next 7 days or whatever that looks like, right? And really map out your content for every week and think about, okay, the upcoming week's email or podcast theme is this. That means I'm having these 2 emails. That means that I'm having these 4 social media posts that I'm going to put out on Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok, right? Whatever that looks like for you. And so I would choose one day a week, start there and think about the upcoming week. Then you can slowly start to work your way up to maybe 2 weeks at a time or maybe a month at a time sometimes, right? Actually, I go back and forth between sometimes I do weekly planning and sometimes I do monthly planning. And actually currently I am planning out multiple months at a time because I'm giving myself that stress-free summer, that stress-free social media summer that I keep talking about, right? So currently I am thinking into June and July. At the recording of this episode, it is only June right now, my friend. But this episode is actually going to be released in July, which is kind of crazy, right? But I'm thinking ahead. I'm also planning into August as much as I possibly can so that I don't have to use a lot of brain power when Brett and I are driving through California, because that's what we're planning for this summer is a road trip, right? So your batch planning workflow can look however it makes sense for you. It can change over time. It can change with the seasons, but make sure that you do just give yourself expectations and create that batch planning workflow that you want to commit to, right? So that you can actually get it done and you're not still scrambling to repurpose in all the areas, right? The last thing I want to leave you with is once again that you do not have to do it all. You do not have to show up in all the places. Your plan is allowed to evolve over time. It's allowed to change with the seasons, okay? You are the CEO of your business. You are the CEO of your content strategy and your repurposing plan. And you get to make the decisions as to where you're showing up, how you're showing up, when you're showing up, all those things, okay? So create a plan that works for you, my friend. You've got this. I believe in you. I'm so proud of you. Go repurpose things. Thanks so much for listening, my friend. For show notes and a whole lot of other awesome freebies, visit feelgoodsocial.com. Simply go to feelgoodsocial.com for all the goods.